Zebulun, Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command thee, O Spirit. Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
These are the names of the sons of Israel who went into Egypt with Jacob, each with his family, Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. The descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt, and now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. But the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous, so that the land was filled with them. Then the new king, who did not know about Joseph, came to power in Egypt. And he says, look at all these motherfuckers, he said to his people. These Israelites have become too numerous for us. Come, and we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with the forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses and store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked to them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with hard labor in brick and mortar, and with all kinds of work in the fields. And all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Siphrah and Puah, when you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivery stool, if it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. And they let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? And the midwives answered the Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous, and they give birth before the midwife arrives. So God was kind to the midwives. And the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. And then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people. Every boy that is born, you must throw them into the Nile, and let every girl live. And we're going to come back to our, what a sinister way to start a story. We're going to come back to that in one second. I'm John, this is the Abracast, and I'm sorry for taking a couple weeks off. I haven't been shy. I'll let you guys know that, I got some life stuff going on, and, no one these days is averse to a little bit of emotional turmoil. So I just desperately needed a little bit more time off than my vacation plans, apparently. So we're getting ready to start into Exodus. I did a lengthy sort of examination of Genesis. You can hit the feature topic link, abracast.com, to check all of that out. But this is great. I'm going to be using, what am I going to be using? I'm going to be using my international red letter, the old international red letter, and also Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews to kind of lay this weird and complex story out. And at the end of the Genesis series, we kind of left it with Jacob and the boys. Jacob and his brothers are kind of like it set up pretty good in Egypt. And then we kind of see here at the beginning in Exodus 1 how that sort of fell apart pretty quickly. So this second book of the Old Testament is it's all about the Israelites getting the fuck out of Egypt, right? And this is the theme is get the fuck out. But this is a reference to way back in Genesis 15. Where Abraham was, I don't know, he was taking a nap. He was going to bed, and the Lord appeared to him, and he says, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterwards they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age." So this is God. He's flashing his signs around or whatever, right? He's like, I'm the master of history. So he's given Abraham through this dream sort of like a preview of what's going to happen to his descendants, and Exodus is how this prophecy kind of comes and takes place, right? So we're going to flip-flop to the Legend of the Jews here. I love using this source. If you guys listen to the Genesis series, that I fucking love it, because the Legends of the Jews, they jump through these wild hoops to make these guys seem like infallible superheroes and stuff, and just when you read the text, you're like, these are very flawed people. Like, there's shit wrong with all of them. But so it's an interesting kind of juxtaposition. But I will err on the side of Ginsburg's The Jews, just because it's so crazy and rich with this Jewish mysticism and stuff. So we're gonna get into that here with this chapter that talks about the parents of Moses, and this is right after Pharaoh's proclamation was issued about the boys being thrown into the river. Decreeing that the men children of the Hebrews were to be cast into the river, this dude Amram, who was the president of the Sanhedrin, decided that in the circumstances it was best for the husbands to live altogether separate from their wives. And he set the example. He divorced his wife, and all the men of Israel did likewise, for he occupied a place of great consideration amongst his people. One reason being that he belonged to a tribe of Levi, the tribe that was faithful to its God, even in the land of Egypt, through the other tribes wavered in their allegiance and attempted to ally themselves with these Egyptian guys, going so far as to give up Abraham's sign of the covenant. To chastise the Hebrews for their impiety, God turned the love of the Egyptians for them into hatred, so that they resolved upon their destruction, mindful of all that he and his people owed to Joseph's wise rule. Pharaoh refused at first to entertain the malicious plan proposed by the Egyptians against these Hebrews. And he spoke to his people and he said, "You fools, we are indebted to these Hebrews for whatever we enjoy, and you desire now to raise up against them." But the Egyptians could not be turned aside from their purpose of ruling Israel. They deposed their king and incarcerated him for 3 months until he declared himself ready to execute with determination that they had resolved upon, and he sought to bring about the ruin of the children of Israel by every conceivable means. Such was the retribution they had drawn down upon themselves in their own acts. Well, as for Amram, not only did he belong to the tribe of Levi, distinguished for its piety, but by reason of his extraordinary piety, he was prominent even among the pious of the tribe. He was triple pious, yo. He was one of the 4 who were immaculate. That means untainted by sin, over whom death would have had no power, and mortality had been decreed against every single human being on the account of the first man and the first woman. And the other 3 that led the same sinless life were Benjamin, Jesse, the father of David, and Chileab, the son of David. If the Shekinah was drawn close again to the dwelling place of mortals, it was due to Amram's piety. How is it that I don't have a fucking pen sitting right here? Ah, here it is. So, let's see. The Shekinah. The Shekinah is like, sort of like a female aspect to the God. This God of these Jews, the God of Yahweh, has a feminine sort of component, and its name is the Shekinah. Originally, the real residence of the Shekinah was among men, but when Adam committed his sin, she withdrew to heaven, at first to the lowest of the 7 heavens. Thence she was banished by Cain's crime, and she retired to the 2nd heaven. The sins of the generation of Enoch removed her still farther from men. And she took up her abode in the 3rd heaven, then successfully the 4th. And the account of the malefactors in the generations of the deluge, in the 5th, during the building of the Tower of Babel, and the confusion of the tongues in the 6th by reason of the wicked Egyptians at the time of Abraham, and finally in the 7th in consequence of the abomination of the inhabitants of Sodom. 6 righteous men, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Levi, Kohath, and Amram, drew the Shekinah back one by one from the 7th to the 1st heaven, and through the 7th righteous man, who would be named Moses, she was made to descend to the earth and abide among men as aforetime. Amram's sagacity, I fucking love that word. Amram's sagacity kept pace with his piety and his learning, and the Egyptians succeeded in enslaving the Hebrews by seductive promises. At first, they gave them a shekel for every brick they made, tempting them to superhuman efforts by the prospect of earning much money. Later, the Egyptians forced them to work without wages. They insisted on having as many bricks as the Hebrews had made when their labor was paid for. But they could demand only a single brick daily from Amram. for he had been the only one who had not led astray by their artifice. He had been satisfied with a single shekel daily, and had therefore made only a single brick daily. Which they had to accept afterwards as the measure of his day's work. As his life partner Amram chose his aunt Jochebed, who was born on the same day with him. She was the daughter of Levi, and she owed her name the divine splendor to the celestial light that radiated from her countenance. She was worthy of being her husband's helpmeet, for she was one of the midwives that imperiled their own lives to rescue the little Hebrew babies. Indeed, if God had not allowed a miracle to happen, she and her daughter Miriam would have been killed by Pharaoh for having resisted his orders and saved the Hebrew children alive. When the king sent his hangman for the two women, God caused them to become invisible, and the bailiffs had to return without accomplishing their errand. The first child of the union between Amram and Jochebed, his wife, who was 126 years old at the time of her marriage, was a girl, and the mother called her Miriam, which means bitterness, for it was the time of her birth that the Egyptians began to envenom the life of the Hebrews. The second child was a boy called Aaron, which means woe unto this pregnancy, because Pharaoh's instruction to the midwives to kill the male children of the Hebrews was proclaimed during the months before Aaron's birth. All right, the birth of Moses. When Amram separated from his wife on the account of the edict published against the male children of the Hebrews, and his example was followed by all the Israelites, his daughter Miriam said to him, "Father, the decree is worse than Pharaoh's decree. The Egyptians aim to destroy only the male children, but thou includest the girls as well." Okay, I'm going to drop the voice. I didn't know this was going to go on so long. Pharaoh deprives his victims of life in the world, and thou preventest children from being born, and thus thou deprivest them of the future life too. Resolved destruction, but who knows whether the intention of the wicked can persist? Thou art a righteous man, and the enactments of the righteous are excluded by God. Hence thy decree will be upheld. And Abram recognized the justice of her plea, and he repaired to the Sanhedrin and put the matter before the body. And the members of the court spoke and said, "It was thou that didst separate husbands and wives from thee. Should go forth permission for remarriage." And Amram then made the proposition to each of the members of the Sanhedrin to return to his wife and wed her clandestinely. The colleagues repudiated the plan, saying, "And who will make it known unto the whole of Israel?" And Amram stood publicly under the wedding canopy with his divorced wife Jochebed, and Aaron and Miriam danced about it, and the angels proclaimed, "Let the mother of children be joyful." His remarriage was solemnized with great ceremony. To the end, the men had followed his example in divorcing their wives might imitate him now in taking them again unto themselves, and so it happened. Old as Jochebed was, she regained her youth. Her skin became soft, her wrinkles in her face disappeared, the warm tints of maiden beauty returned, and in short time she became pregnant. Amram was very uneasy about his wife being with child, and he knew not what to do. He turned to God in prayer. He entreated him to have compassion upon those who had in no wise transgressed the laws of his worship. and afforded them deliverance from the misery they endured, while he rendered abortive the hope of their enemies who yearned for the destruction of their nation. God had mercy on him, and he stood by him in his sleep and exhorted him not to despair. The future favors, he said further, that he did not forget their piety, and he would always reward them for it, as he had granted his favor in other days. Their forefathers knew, therefore the Lord continued to speak, that I shall provide for you altogether what is for your good, and for thee in particular that which shall make thee celebrated. For the child of dread, of whose nativity with the Egyptians have doomed the Israelite children for destruction, shall be this child of thine, and shall remain concealed from those who watch to destroy him. And when he has been bred up in miraculous ways, he shall deliver the Hebrew nation from the distress that they are under by reason of the Egyptians. His memory shall be celebrated while the whole world lasts, and not only among the Hebrews, but among strangers also. And all this shall be the effect of my favor towards thee, and thy prosperity. Also his brother shall be such that he shall obtain my priesthood for himself and his posterity after him unto the end of the world. That's Aaron. After he has been informed of these things by this vision, Amram woke and told all unto his wife Jochebed. His daughter Miriam likewise had a prophetic dream, and she related it to her parents, saying, In this night I saw a man clothed in fine linen. Tell thy father and thy mother. He said that he who shall be born unto them shall be cast into the waters, and through him the waters shall become dry, and the wonders and miracles shall be performed through him. And he shall save my people Israel, and be their leader forever. During her pregnancy, Jochebed observed the child in the womb was destined for great things. All the time she suffered no pain. She suffered none in giving birth to her son, for pious women were not included in the curse pronounced upon Eve, decreeing sorrow in conception and in childbearing. And at the moment of the child's appearance, the whole house was filled with radiance equal to the splendor of the sun and the moon. And still greater miracle followed. The infant was not yet a day old when he began to walk and speak with his parents. And as though he were an adult, he refused to drink milk from his mother's breasts. Jochebed gave birth to the child 6 months after conception. Egyptian bailiffs who knew and kept strong watch over all of the pregnant women in order to be on the spot in time to carry off their newborn boys had not expected delivery for 3 more months. So this thing about him being born radiant and able to talk and walk around, this is the same thing that we found in the legends of the Jews about Noah, when Noah was born. They thought he was some kind of angel. He was born with glow-in-the-dark skin. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. These Egyptian bailiffs, they were on to Jochebed. So Jochebed does, what anybody would do, what any mother of a supernatural newborn creature would do. Jochebed accordingly took an ark fashioned from bulrushes and dabbed them with pitch on the outside and lined it with clay within. The reason she used bulrushes were because they float on the surface of the water. And she put pitch only on the outside to protect the child as much as possible against the annoyance of a disagreeable odor. Over the child as it lay in the ark, she spread a tiny canopy to shade the babe with the words, "Perhaps I shall not live to see him under the marriage canopy." And then she abandoned the ark on the shore of the Red Sea. Yet it was not left unguarded, for Mother Miriam, or her daughter Miriam, stayed nearby to discover whether a prophecy she had uttered would be fulfilled. Before the child's birth, his sister had foretold her mother would bring forth the son that would redeem Israel when he was born, and the house was filled with a brilliant light, and Amram kissed her on the head, but he was forced into the expedient of exposing the child, and he beat her on her head, saying, "My daughter, what hath become of thy prophecy?" Therefore Miriam stayed and strolled along the shore to observe what would be the fate of the babe, and what would come of her prophecy concerning him. And the day the child was exposed was the 21st month of Nisan. Hold on. I'm going to flip back to the old red letter here. So this is Exodus 2:4. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank, and she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. And she opened and saw the baby, and he was crying, and she felt sorry for him, and she says, "This is one of those Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse this baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. And the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." And the woman took the baby and nursed him. And when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." There's a translation, or what the name Moses means, and it means to be drawn out. So that's where this motherfucker got his name. What we need to do right now, though, now that we got past that, is we actually need to rewind it a little bit and go back to the Legends of the Jews. There's a super interesting part right here. By exposing their son to danger, Amram and Jochebed had effected the withdrawal of the Pharaoh's command in joining the extermination of the Hebrew men children. The day Moses was set adrift in the little ark, the astrologers had come to Pharaoh to tell him the glad tidings that the danger threatening the Egyptians on the account of one boy whose doom lay in the water had been averted. Thereupon Pharaoh cried a halt to the drowning of the boys of his empire, and the astrologers had seen something, but they knew not what, in the announced message, the import of which they did not comprehend. Water was indeed the doom of Moses, but that did not mean that he would perish in the water of the Nile. It had reference to the water of the Meribah, the waters of strife, and how they would cause his death in the desert before he had completed his task of leading his people to the promised land. Pharaoh, misled by the obscure vision of his astrologers, thought that the future redeemer of Israel was to lose his life by drowning. To make sure the boy whose appearance was foretold by these astrologers might not escape his fate, he had ordered all boys, even children of the Egyptians born during the period of 9 months, to be cast into the water on the account of the merits of Moses. The 600,000 men children of the Hebrews begotten in the same night with him and thrown into the waters the same day were rescued miraculously together with him. And it was therefore not an ideal boast if he said later, "The people that went forth out of the water on the account of my merits are 600,000 men." So, by like the middle of Exodus 2, by Exodus 2:11, Moses is 40 years old. The legends of the Jews, however, take a lot more time with the infancy and Moses growing up. So we're going to extrapolate a few of these stories as we're going. Some of the interesting stuff, right? Like this one here. This is in a chapter called The Infancy of Moses. Moses' understanding was far beyond his years. His instructors observed that he disclosed keener comprehension than is usual at his age. All his actions in his infancy promised greater ones after he should come to man's estate. And when he was but 3 years old, God granted him remarkable size. As for his beauty, he was so attractive that frequently those meeting him as he was carried along the road were obligated to turn and stare at him. They would leave what they were about and stand still a great while looking after him, for the loveliness of the child was so wondrous that he held the gaze of the spectator. The daughter of Pharaoh, perceiving Moses to be an extraordinary lad, adopted him as her son, for she had no child of her own. She informed her father of her intention concerning him in these words: I have brought up a child who is divine in form and in an excellent mind, and I have received him through the bounty of the river in a wonderful way. I thought about it proper to adopt him as my son and as the heir of thy kingdom. And when she had spoken thus, she put the infant between her father's hands, and she took him and hugged him close to his breast. Here's another one. When Moses was in his 3rd year, Pharaoh was dining one day with the queen Alphanarate at his right hand, his daughter Bintna with the infant Moses on her lap, and Balaam the son of Beor together with his 2 sons, and all the princes of the realm sitting at the table in the king's presence. It happened that the infant took the crown off the king's head and placed it on his own. And when the king and the prince saw this, they were terrified. They each in one turn expressed astonishment. The king said to the princes, What speak you and what say you, O princes, on this matter? And what is to be done to this Hebrew boy on the account of this act? Balaam spoke, saying, Remember now, O my lord and king, the dream which you didst have many days ago, on how thy servant interpreted it unto thee. Now this is a child of the Hebrews, in whom the Spirit of God let my Lord and King imagine in his heart that being a child he did the thing without knowledge. For he is a Hebrew boy, and wisdom and understanding are with him, although he is yet a child, and with wisdom he has done this, and chose unto himself the kingdom of Egypt. For this the manner of all Hebrews, to deceive kings and their magnates, and to do all things cunningly in order to make the kings of the earth and their men stumble. Here we go. Surely you knoweth that Abraham and their father acted thus, who made the armies of Nimrod, the king of Babel, and Amalek, the king of Gerar, to stumble. He has possessed himself of the land of the children of Heth, in whom the whole realm of Canaan and their father Abraham went down to Egypt and said of Sarah his wife, She is my sister, in order to make Egypt and its king to stumble. And his son Isaac did likewise when he went to Gerar. Anyhow, blah, blah. Jacob also dealt treacherously with his brother, took his birthright and his blessing from him, and he went to Padam Aram to Laban, his brother, and obtained his daughters from him cunningly, and his cattle, and all his belongings, and fled away. And he returned to the land of Canaan to his father. And then the sons of his brother Joseph went down to Egypt and became a slave. And when he was put into prison for 12 years, and the former Pharaoh delivered him from the prison and magnified him above all the princes of Egypt on the account of his interpretation of the king's dreams. But when God caused a famine to descend upon the whole world, Joseph sent for his father and brought him down into Egypt, his brethren and his father's household, and he supplied them with food without pay or reward, and he acquired Egypt and made slaves of all its inhabitants. Now, therefore, my lord king, behold, this child has risen up in their stead in Egypt to do according to their deeds, and to make sport of every man, be he king, prince, or judge. If it please the king, let us now spill his blood on the ground, unless he grow up and snatch the government from thine hands, and the hope of Egypt will be cut off after he reigns. Let us moreover call for the judges and the wise men of Egypt, that we may know whether the judgment of death be due to this child, as I have said, and then we will slay him. So Pharaoh sent and called for the wise men of Egypt, and they came, and the angel Gabriel was disguised as one of them. When they were asked their opinion in the matter, Gabriel spoke up and said, "If it please the king, let him place the onyx stone before the child, and a coal of fire, and if he stretches his hand out and grasps the onyx stone, then we shall know that the child doth with wisdom all that he hath done, and we will slay him. But if he stretches his hand out and grasps the coal of fire, then we shall know that it was not with consciousness that he did the thing, and he shall live." And this counsel seemed good in the eyes of the king. And when they had placed the stone and the coal before the child, Moses stretched his hand out towards the onyx stone and attempted to seize it. But Gabriel guided his hand away from it and placed it upon the live coal. And the coal burnt the child's hands, and he lifted up and touched his mouth and burned part of his lips and part of his tongue. And for this, his whole life he became slow of speech and of a slow tongue. It's interesting. Remember how I said that these legends add like a lot of context. Like people get when they read Exodus that Moses isn't the best orator. You know, he's not Ronald Reagan. You know what I'm saying? So here we got, as part of the story, we got this this idea of why he is slow of speech, because he caught his hand on fire and touched his face. Seeing this, the king and the princes knew that Moses had not acted with knowledge in taking the crown from his head, and they refrained from slaying him. God himself, who protected Moses, turned the king's mind to grace, and his foster mother snatched him away, and she had educated with great care the Hebrews depended on him and expected great things from him. Would be done by him by the Egyptians were suspicious of what would follow from such an education as this. At great cost, teachers were invited to come to Egypt from neighboring lands to educate this child Moses. And some came from their own accord to instruct him on the sciences and the liberal arts. By reasons of his admirable endowments of mind, he soon excelled his teachers in knowledge. His learning seemed a process of mere recollecting, and when there was a difference of opinion among scholars, he selected the correct one instinctively, for his mind refused to store up anything that was false. So as Moses grows up, according to the legends of the Jews, as Moses grows up, he goes to this land of Goshen, and he finds these children of Israel being harshly treated as these slaves, and we put to work, son. And Moses becomes this he becomes this advocate. I guess we would call him nowadays. He became this advocate for these Jewish slaves, and he's saying things like, "I would rather die myself than watch you guys work so terribly." And he's trying to give them some sort of emotional support, and he winds up instilling this rule that they have to give the Hebrew slaves like 1 day rest. And he was like, how about Saturday, right? How about we let them rest on Saturday? And this is sort of like Moses kind of becoming like a little god, you know? Why don't we let them rest on Saturday, on God's Sabbath? But then this other thing winds up happening to him, and it's this sort of complicated story. I'm going to try to chew through it here real fast towards the end. While Moses abode in Goshen, an incident of great import occurred. A superintendent of the service of the children of Israel, an officer of among them, was set over every 10, and 10 such officers were under the surveillance of an Egyptian taskmaster. One of these Hebrew officers, Daneth by name, had a wife, Shelomith, and the daughter of Dibri, in the tribe of Dan, who was extraordinarily beautiful, but inclined to be very loquacious. Whenever the Egyptian taskmaster set over her husband came to their house on business connected with his office, she would approach him pleasantly and enter the room into conversation with him. This beautiful Israelitish woman enkindled a mad passion in his breast, and he sought out and found a cunning way of satisfying his lustful desire. One day he appeared at the break of dawn at the house of Daneth, roused him from his sleep, and ordered him to hurry his detachment of men to their work. The husband scarcely out of sight, he executed the villainy he had planned and dishonored the woman. And the fruit of this illicit relation was the blasphemer of the name whom Moses ordered to execution on the march through the desert. Here we just got a little fast forward into the story. At the moment when the Egyptian slipped out of Shelomith's chamber, Daneth returned home. Vexed that his crime had come to the knowledge of the injured husband, the taskmaster goaded him to work with excessive vigor and dealt him blow after blow with the intention to kill him. Young Moses happened to visit this place, which this much abused and tortured Hebrew was at work. And Daneth hasted towards him and complained of all the wrong and suffering the Egyptian had inflicted upon him. Full of wrath, Moses, whom the Holy Spirit had acquainted with the injury done to the Hebrew. Imagine getting gossiped by God. God's like, hey, dude, do you know what this motherfucker did? This motherfucker dishonored Shelomith. The injury done to the Hebrew officer by the Egyptian taskmaster cried out to the latter, saying, not enough that thou hast dishonored this man's wife, thou aimest to kill him too? And turning to God, he spoke further, what will become of thy promises to Abraham, that his posterity shall be numerous as the stars, if his children are given over to death? And that what will become of the revelation on Sinai if the children of Israel are exterminated? Moses wanted to see if someone would step forward and, impelled by the zeal of the curse of God and for God's law, would declare himself ready to avenge the outrage. And he waited in vain, and he determined to act himself. Naturally enough, he hesitated to take the life of a human being. He did not know whether the evildoer might not be brought to repentance and then lead a life of pious endeavor. He also considered that there would perhaps be some among the descendants to spring up from the Egyptian for whose sake their wicked ancestor might rightfully lay claim to clemency. The Holy Spirit allied all his doubts, and he was made to see that not the slightest hope existed that good would come from either the malefactor himself or from any of his offspring. Then Moses was willing to requite himself for his evil deeds. Nevertheless, he first consulted with the angels to hear what they had to say, and they agreed that the Egyptian deserved a death, and Moses acted according to their opinion. Neither physical strength nor a weapon was needed to carry out his purpose. He merely pronounced the name of God, and the Egyptian was a corpse. To the bystanders, the Israelites, Moses said, "The Lord compared you unto the sand of the seashore. And as that sand moves noiselessly from place to place, so I pray you shall keep the knowledge of what has happened a secret within yourselves. Let nothing be heard concerning it." The wish expressed by Moses was not honored. The slaying of the Egyptian remained no secret, and those who betrayed it were Israelites, Dathan and Abiram, the son of Palu, the tribe of Reuben, notorious for their effrontery. So these guys try to bum rush Moses. And Moses exclaims, "Thou art a villain to lift thy hands up against an Israelite, even if he is no better than you." And Daneth replied, "Young man, who hath made thee be a judge over us? Thou has not attained the years of maturity. We know very well that thou art the son of Jacobeth, though the people call thee the son of the princess Bitnah. And if thou should attempt to play the part of our master and judge, we shall publish abroad the thing thou thus did unto the Egyptian, or peradventure thou harborest the intention to slay us as thou didst slay him, by pronouncing the name of God." Not satisfied with these taunts, the noble pair of brothers betook themselves to Pharaoh and spoke before him. "Moses dishonoreth thy royal mantle and thy crown," to which Pharaoh replied, saying, "Much good may it do him, but they pursued the subject. It helps thine enemies, Pharaoh," they continued, whereupon he replied, "Much good may it do him." Still they went on, not the son of thy daughter." The last words did not fail making an impression upon Pharaoh. A royal command was issued for the arrest of Moses, and he was condemned to death by the sword. The angels came to God and said, "Moses, the familiar of thine house, is held under restraint." And God replied, "I will espouse this cause." But the angels urged, "This verdict of death has been pronounced, and yet they are leading him to execution." And again God made his reply as he did before, "I will espouse his cause." Moses mounted the scaffold, and a sword sharp beyond compare was set upon his neck 10 times, and it always slipped away, because his neck was hard as ivory. And still a great miracle came to pass. God sent down the angel Michael in the guise of the hangman. And the human hangman charged by Pharaoh with the execution was changed into the form of Moses. What? And spears Moses, the angel, the spurous Moses, the angel killed with the very sword in which the executioner had purpose to slay the intended victim. Meantime, Moses took flight. Pharaoh ordered his pursuit, but it was in vain. The king's troops were partially stricken with blindness, partially dumbness, and the dumb could give no information about the abiding place of Moses, and the blind, though they knew where it was, could not get to it. All right, well, this is a great place to stop for this episode, and a great place in the story to stop. So I'm John. This has been the Abracast. Thank you guys for tuning in. Sorry again about the 3 missing weeks. I plan on making it up somehow. I don't know if I'm going to just flood with some extra shows or what. But thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Oh wait, hold the phone. Not yet. I want to let you guys know that there is this magical book called The Sixth Book of Moses. And it has like all these cool graphics, these cool, like, you know, people talk about sigils nowadays. They're not really sigils. They're these sort of magic plates or tablet. I don't really know how to describe them, but I did some operations from the Sixth Book of Moses, and you can look back and find them, the episode about them when I did them. So this doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the origin story of Moses here that we're kind of working our way through, but there is this Sixth Book of Moses t-shirt. You can find it on Abracast.com in the storefront. It is pretty cool. And like I said, you go back and listen to that episode with the sixth book. And now, that's all that I wanted to get out there. Like, this t-shirt's available and it's pretty cool. And yeah, with that, I'm John, and this has been the Abracast. And I hope you guys enjoyed the show.
You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books. Take control of your destiny. Understand your past. Put your present in context and know your future with a twist. Check out the designs and watch the videos about the Abracast Tarot card deck. Your body is your temple, so let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult themed t-shirts and other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Welcome to the Red Archive. Get access to over 50 hours of archived episodes, more bonus audio, additional exclusive content. All this for only $1 a month. Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Abracast.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts.